Ganapataye Namaha. Om Shri Matre Namaha. Now I want to discuss the topic is imagination is greater than details. First prayer. Stapakaya cha dharmasya satyadharmarataya cha bhajatam kalpavrukshaya namatam kamathenave. From Alexander the Great to Napoleon, Plato to Spinoza, Isaac Newton to Albert Einstein, and Henry Ford to Steve Jobs. Ideas are the seed of all achievement, and endless sea of ideas, instantly or constantly, flows around our planet, streamlining inspiration, fueling the minds of entrepreneurs, ultimately driving progress and innovation. It is pragmatism and action that now seem to be the overriding forces in challenging these ideas. But what lies beneath is the blueprint of inspiration, desire, and imagination. What is inspiration? An apple falling from a tree in Isaac Newton's garden inspired the understanding of gravitational force and formulated one of the principal laws on the mechanics of the universe. Around 300 years later, a startup launched in a Silicon Valley garage that would rise to become global tech giant. Steve Jobs would tell Steve Wozniak that its name would be Apple. In his own words, I like apples a lot. Apple is ahead of Atari in the phone book, and I used to work at Atari. We found the juxtaposition of something that seemed to epitomize what we were going after, which was simplicity and yet very refined sophistication. The apple seemed to symbolize that. On a difficult plane, the harmony of nature and the vastness of the universe around us have been a constant source of inspiration to the greatest scientific minds. Mankind's desire to discover the unknown and reach new frontiers has led physicists, astronomers, and cosmologists to an unending quest to decipher the mechanics of the universe and unravel the laws what govern matter and energy. From the foundation laid by Albert Einstein and the theory of relativity to quantum mechanics and the evolution of superstring theory, the passion of humankind to understand its origins has never ceased. When ideas fuel inspiration, the in between state that leads to action is imagination. We cross the oceans to discover new lands, invented means to travel the world, reached for the stars, and landed on the moon. All that stated as an idea first held in the minds of imagination. Imagination is the highest freedom of all and the one that no one can deprive us of. The greatness of creative imagination is praised not only by the romantics and artists of this world, but the brightest of scientific brains. Einstein famously said, imagination is more important than knowledge. For knowledge is limited to all we know and understand, while imagination embraces the entire world and all there ever will be to know and understand. Nikola Tesla, who is he? One of history's most fascinating innovators and a futurist, was a man of legendary imaginative power. Tesla had an eidetic memory that enabled him to precisely recall images, visualize objects, and literally work out of his inventions in his imagination. Once he inspired by an idea, he would start building it up in his imagination to the point of first operating an invention in his brain as if it were real before proceeding to its concrete form. Now, let us find out determination. It is an idea, beginning of everything, but in the ingredients in the capsule of success or perception, skills, and consciousness, focus, persistence, and belief. Ralph Waldo Emerson wisely said, the only person you are determined to become is the person you decided to be. The certainty of purpose has been described as the greatest principle of all in the formula of success, being the force of psychological charge and the focus of direction of all action for the big achievers and leaders of this life. When Bill Gates and Warren Buffett first met, Gates' mother, who was on dinner hosting duties, asked everyone around the table to identify the single most important factor accredited for their success through life. Gates and Buffett's gave the same one word answer: focus. In this world, there are those that follow the general paradigm, and there are the ones that diverge with passion. These are the ones that break away from norms and can climb the highest mountains of achievement against what life might rationally have had in store for them. Desire and determination combine to a substance that reigns above all. Plato said on the importance of desire that it must drive the soul with a reined in craziness. Once upon a time, an English teacher residing in Hangzhou was introduced to the internet by a friend. His first reaction was to search for beer in the Chinese market, discovering that online that also there was nothing relevant online. The individual was Jack Ma, and the discovery propelled the growth of Alibaba to the biggest ever tech IPO in US history. He is not a technologist, neither is he a coder. He even struggled to pass university exams. He described himself as a terrific fighter since a young age, with no fear for opponents bigger than him, with a mantra of never, never give up. Ma has declared that he could be a general if he were born in a period of war. When Alibaba was battling eBay in China, reporters called him Crazy Jack because of his animated manner of expression and boldness. His energy levels are endless and his methods far from conventional. And finally, there are the dreamers and visionaries of this world. What better way to describe the power of having a dream than by giving the final word to Richard Branson? Dream seriously. Don't betray your dreams for the sake of fitting in. Dreaming is one of humanity's greatest gifts. It champions aspiration, spurs innovation, leads to change, and propels the world forward. So, dream big. Imagination may have been essential to his breakthrough, thinking to his break, and Einstein's discovery also rested on his vast knowledge of physical science. Knowledge and imagination let him see the relationship between space, time, and energy. Using mathematics, he developed a model for understanding how objects and light behave in extreme conditions, as in the subatomic world, where the old Newtonian principles didn't appear to work. It was a ridiculous interpretation that could only have made sense if newspaper readers were no bigger than a portion or could travel near the speed of light. This misconception was so common that the past writer used to start his interview. Relativity. What word is more symbolic of the age? We have ceased to be positive of anything. We look upon all things in the light of relativity. Relativity has become the plaything of the parlor philosopher. Einstein has always patiently clarified his concept. The meaning of relativity has been widely misunderstood. Philosophers play with the word like a child with a doll. Relativity, as we see it, merely denotes that certain physical and mechanical facts which have been regarded as positive and permanent are relative with regard to certain other facts in the sphere of physics and mechanics. It does not mean that everything in life is relative and that we have the right to twin or to turn the entire world mischievously topsy turvy. The world of the early 20th century certainly felt like it was being inverted with or without relativity. Even as Einstein was developing his theory, about the space time continuum and the nature of light, old Europe was dying in record numbers. Just a few weeks before Einstein released his general theory of relativity in 1916, the German Imperial Army began its assault at Verdun. In the ensuing 10-month battle, France and Germany suffered 8 lakh casualties. 4 months later, the British launched their catastrophic attack at the Somme and suffered 58,000 casualties in a single day. Dr. Einstein accompanying Mrs. Einstein's piano song with his violin. The survivors of the debacle were disillusioned by the waste of this war and the peace that followed. The youth of Europe and America were looking for new truths. The old ones seemed empty and especially lethal to young men. They saw how noble sacrifice could be used for political ends, and they had seen how virtue and faith fared against masked machine guns. The relativity they read about seemed promising if it meant that thousands would not have to die needlessly, or that could live beyond the limiting moral codes of their parents. Einstein himself didn't indulge in any of this relativism. He was a man of strong beliefs, not equivocations. For instance, his love of music was absolute. Einstein's taste in music is severely classical. Even Wagner is, to him, no unallied feast of the ears. He adores Mozart and Bach. He even prefers their work to the architectural music of Beethoven. He disagreed with the traditional Jewish concept of free will. I am determinist. As such, I do not believe in free will. The Jews believe in free will. They believe that man shapes his own life. We can reject the doctrine philosophically. In that respect, we are not a Jew. Practically, we are nevertheless compelled to act as if freedom of the will existed. If we wish to live in a civilized community, we must act as if man is a responsible being. He never expressed any belief in a personal God, but he believed in the historical Jesus, not the popularized prophet, such as appeared in a best selling biography by Emil Laduring. Einstein was not relativist on the subject of nationalism, which he saw grow violent and intolerant from his Berlin home. Nationalism is an infantile disease. It is the measles of mankind. It was different in the United States, he believed. Nationalism in the US does not assume such disagreeable forms as in Europe. This may be due partly to the fact that your country is so immense that you do not think in terms of narrow borders. It may be due to the fact that you do not suffer from the heritage of hatred or fear, which poisons the relations of the nations of Europe. It is interesting to see how Einstein viewed America 3 years before he made it his new home. In America, more than anywhere else, the individual is lost in the achievements of the many. America is beginning to be the world leader in scientific investigation. American scholarship is both patient and inspiring. The Americans show an unselfish devotion to science, which is the very opposite of the conventional European view of your countrymen. Too many of us look upon Americans as dollar chasers. This is a cruel label. Even if it is reiterated thoughtlessly by the Americans themselves. It is not true that the dollar is an American fetish. The American student is not interested in dollars, not even in success as such, but in his task, the object of the search. It is his painstaking application of the study of the infinitely large. The only criticism Einstein could find for America was its emphasis on homogenizing its citizens into a single time. Without imagination, there would be no new ideas or inventions, or nothing new will ever happen to all, because every idea or invention or anything else new comes from only imagination. Think of things that could happen in the future. Maybe we will find a cure for cancer. Someone will invent flying cars. We will travel through different galaxies, and someone will invent time travel. Or maybe these ideas are too distant for you. Maybe you want to imagine something closer in the near future. Maybe you could travel around the world, graduate and get a job, learn how to play an instrument, and design your own clothing range. Either way, without imagination, none of these things would happen, whether it is time travel or designing clothes, etc. They are very different things, but they share one thing in common. Without imagination, they both would not be able to happen. Without imagination, our world would never get progress. Our world would be the same when we are not in imagination. If it was not for imagination, we would not have written any historical events. This competition would not be running if it was not for imagination. Humans would not have stayed alive this long. In fact, they would be extinct by now. If humans did not have and use imagination, we would be the same as robots or machines without imagination or any creation. Even animals have imagination. Imagination makes us all unique. And this is what makes the world so interesting. Think of some famous people who are the Steve Jobs, Lewis Carroll, Thomas Edison, Richard Branson, David Williams, Adele, and David Guetta. Every single one of them has imagination and uses it. Every single person has imagination. Just some people know how to use it better than others. Every person who is successful uses their imagination and uses it well. However, some people use it better than others. Imagination is not significant just for community in general. Also, it can also be interpreted as a fundamental element of theology and can be better articulated through contemplation. There have been great philosophers in the past who imagined the unattainable, and today our societies have certain values that are very relevant. Knowledge is also important because simply by imagining things, one cannot convert them into reality. An intellectual mind is inspired for such tasks, but without imagination, knowledge will be of no use. We would be stagnant as far as development is concerned. It is always good to acquire knowledge, but having the ability to imagine is far more important and inevitable. By acquiring knowledge, we learn things, but by the imagination further increases our knowledge. Above all, the knowledge that we acquire is again a result of imagination that guides us to knowledge. So, imagination is a sort of concierge to knowledge. We cannot gain knowledge unless we have imagination. So, imagination is more important than knowledge. Imagination is intrinsic to our inner lives. You could even say that it makes up a second universe inside our heads. We invent animals and events that don't exist. We rerun history with alternative outcomes. We envision social and moral utopias. We reveal in fantasy art and we meditate both on what we could have been and what we might become. Animators such as Hayao Miyazaki, Walt Disney, and the people at Pixar Studios are masterful at imagination. But they are not only creating a public version of our everyday private lives. Even if you could see the fantastic mashup inside the mind of average 5-year-old, then Star Wars and Harry Potter would seem sober and dull. Apart from some cryptic passages in Aristotle and Kant, philosophy has said almost nothing about imagination. And what it says seems thoroughly disconnected from the creativity that artists and lay people call imaginative. This rather mechanical approach to the imagination is echoed in more recent computation and modular theories of mind, according to which human thinking is packaged by innate processors. It is perhaps unsurprising that philosophers and cognitive theorists have a rather arid view of the imagination, but our everyday ideas about the imagination are not much better. Its work is unconscious and it paves the way for knowledge, but it's not abstract or linguistic enough to stand as actual knowledge. Om Shriyakantaya Kalyananidaya Nidayathinam Shri Venkatanivasaya Srinivasaya Mangalam Mangalasasana Madacharya Purogamaihi Sarvaischa Purvairacharya Satkrutayastu Mangalam.